The first lesson, the final topic, looks at the situation in the Persian Gulf, the Middle East, around the Persian Gulf and in the Middle East, and the life of a young Saddam Hussein. This is the first topic in a first lesson in a topic called Why Did Events in the Gulf Matter Between 1970 and 2000? In this lesson, actually, we're going to go a little bit before 1970 and examine the rise to power of Saddam Hussein, who most of you may know as the leader of Iraq before the US and British operations in the early part of 2000 deposed him. What are the reasons for tension in the Middle East? And there are fivefold. First and foremost, the oil. More than 70% of the world's available crude oil is in the Middle East, and there's a need for this, obviously, around the world. And therefore, events in the Middle East, generally speaking, don't concern the people only living in the Middle East. They have far-reaching global and international ramifications, and as such, the need for this oil creates tension not only between countries in the Middle East, but between countries in the Middle East and countries outside of the Middle East, nominally, let's say Britain, certainly in the first half of the 20th century, and then the United States thereafter. The second one is the support for the State of Israel, or lack thereof. All Arab states generally oppose the creation of the State of Israel in 1948. Its support from the United States, of course, is a dramatic departure from support by the United States is a dramatic departure from the United States policy of working in coordination with the countries in the Middle East. Israel and the United States relationship to it will be problematic, especially as the United States becomes heavily involved in issues in the Middle East from, let's say, the 1990s forward. Thirdly, there's religion. The vast majority of the people in this region are Muslims, and the Muslims themselves are split between two predominant groups known as the Sunni and the Shia Muslims. These groups have differing opinions over who is the natural successor, which group of Muslims was the natural successor to the Prophet Muhammad. Both the Sunnis and Shias believe it's them, and therefore, even within the Muslim community, these two groups don't get along. National identity is an issue. There's the issue of those in the western part of the Middle East consider themselves Arab, emanating from the original Persian tribes, and those on the eastern side of the Middle East, particularly Iranian, have more of a sort of an Eastern Afghan origin. And between these groups, there are not only differences in Shia and Sunni, there's differences between Arab and not. And of course, destabilizing the region between 1970 and 2000 is the leadership of two individuals in particular, Saddam Hussein and the Ayatollah in Iraq, and the Ayatollah Khomeini in Iran. Now, focusing in quickly on the importance of the Gulf, as I said, more than half the world's oil, approximately around 70% of the world's refinable oil, or easily refinable oil, is found in the Persian Gulf region. And it's the interests of the industrialized nation. It's in their interest to promote peace and stability in the Middle East. And that makes, I guess, the fact that this is one of the most contentious areas a little bit more perplexing. Of course, they want to make conditions that are favorable to trade and prosperity. Nevertheless, throughout this entire time, the region's instability is rampant, and there's volatility all over the place, which has dramatic effects on the economy worldwide. When events affect the production of oil, and where there was economic and political crisis, the oil-consuming industrialized countries will find themselves involved, as we'll learn. So looking at Iraq, now I'm not going to read you through this, but what you need to understand is that Iraq has had many changes in government, and that changes in government has presented Iraq in the Middle East as a country of mass instability throughout this region. It starts off for the first half of the 20th century, generally speaking. There was a British mandate after the Treaty of Versailles. That British mandate was abruptly ended in the 1950s, replaced with a monarchy, several rebellions and several iterations between sort of a rebellious party leadership or Arab nationalist leadership and a military dictatorship, eventually settling by the end of the 1970s with a dictatorship led by a military strongman in Saddam Hussein. Just a quick fact file on Iraq's three major Muslim groups. Northern Iraq is populated by a group known as the Kurds. They're approximately 20% of the overall population of Iraq. These guys are a majority Sunni group, but they identify with the land of Kurdistan more generally than they do with their sort of Arab, or sort of their Muslim distinction, Sunni or Shia. They enjoyed a large degree of self-rule and still did enjoy a degree of self-rule, but they've always wanted independence from the Iraq that was created as a consequence of the First World War. Central and southern Iraq, through the area often referred to as the Fertile Crescent, is a majority population of Shiites. These guys represent about 60% of the population. These guys, even though they are the majority of the population, have never really been the ruling class of Iraq. And the Sunni-dominated regime of Saddam Hussein, the Sunni Muslims who have generally controlled Iraq, both through the royal family and then through Saddam Hussein, had always found hostility within their own country, more particularly with the Shiites. Therefore, it is the Sunnis who are the dominant ruling group in Iraq and have been since the British established the monarchy in 1921. Most of the Ba'ath Party, of which Saddam Hussein was a member and then their leader of, were Sunni Muslims. And the Sunni Muslims were also the ruling family of the royalists of Iraq, who were placed in power by the British once their mandate sort of, let's just say, expired. Who is Saddam Hussein? Saddam Hussein is, well, it's difficult to know about all of the details of his early life because he grew up incredibly poor, about 100 kilometers north of Baghdad. What we do know is he didn't know his father. His father died, in fact, before he was born. His mother was a fortune teller who despised the fact that she was left husbandless with a new baby and actually tried to kill herself and the baby before Saddam was born. When Saddam was young, living in a relatively unhappy home, it was made worse by the fact that his stepfather, actually the brother of his father, who his mother remarried, was a violent bully who beat Saddam frequently and harshly and prevented from attending him school. He had him do things such as run criminal errands for him around town. Saddam never learned to read and write until the age of 10, and even when he did, he was actually self-taught because he was forbidden to go to school. At an early age, realizing the tension and the hostility towards Saddam in the home, his mother sent him to live with his uncle, probably the most dominant influence in his life, a man named Kiryallah Talfa. And Kiryallah became effectively the foster father of Saddam Hussein. He was a military leader and had some prominence in the town because of his military background, but was also actually a militant Arab nationalist. And an Arab nationalist is somebody who wants Arab states to achieve self-determination. So Iraqis or the Arabs in that region, the Sunnis in his case, to dominate their own country, and they were of course opposed to colonialism. Then he teaches Saddam this national or Arab nationalism from an early age. Kiryallah actually finds himself between 1941 and 1947 in prison because in 1941 he actually is part of a rebellion to try and overthrow the British in Iraq. Actually, that rebellion coincidentally is sponsored by the Nazi Party and Adolf Hitler, trying to destabilize British interests worldwide and help him win the war. The British crushed this insurgency, and some of the leaders are executed. Others, like Kiryallah, find themselves in jail. He spends 41 to 47 in jail, and upon his release, actually goes back to the town, and Saddam hears of his release and goes to live with them. It is after his release that he teaches Saddam some of the most important things in his life. Again, reinstilling a pride in his sort of Arab nationality and encouraging Arab nationalism with the young Saddam. And he encourages him to hate the Hashemite monarchy, the one that is propped up by the British. Additionally, he'll enroll Saddam in school with an eye towards getting Saddam into the military academy eventually. But Saddam will actually fail the entrance exam to the Baghdad Military Academy in 1957, which was a tremendous blow to the young boy. His early political activity flows from the fact that he was effectively directionalist. And, you know, you have a young, angry kid taught at a young age to be both a violent Arab nationalist. It is natural that he finds himself joining, like his uncle, the prominent revolutionary, most radical group in Iraq, a group known as the Ba'ath Party. These guys are Arab nationalists. They want an Arab Iraqi state dominated by the Sunnis, no doubt, but at the same time, they would like to achieve this state violently, overthrow the Hashemite monarchy, and establish a sort of a Ba'ath Party-led rule, which has some actual socialist elements to it. Saddam's role in this is effectively to commit violent acts on their behalf, and Saddam is good at this. He had been taught to be a criminal from a young age. In 1958, he earns his stripes and gets recognition within the Ba'ath Party for assassinating a local government official in the city of Tikrit, who had informed on his uncle and his revolutionary activities. And as a result, he's selected for his skills to carry out more assassination attempts. And the big one he's actually planned for and trained for is an attempted assassination by the Ba'ath Party on General Abdul Karim Qasim. By the late 1950s, the British-led Hashemite monarchy had been overthrown by a military coup, and General Karim Qasim Abdul Karim Qasim had become the leader of Iraq. And in this failed, let's say, assassination attempt, Saddam finds himself wounded. He's actually wounded by one of his own guys because they sort of try and pinpoint the guy's car down the street, and they're crossfire shooting at each other, relatively haphazardly, and Saddam is shot in the leg. He does escape, though. He manages to flee into the desert, disguising himself as a Bedouin, and makes his way out of Iraq. By this point, he's one of Iraq's most wanted men for, of course, trying to assassinate the leader of Iraq, and makes his way, believe it or not, all the way across the desert to Cairo in Egypt, but really the heart of the Arab world. Now, just a couple, before we continue, facts on the Ba'ath Party. First of all, most Ba'athists are Sunni Muslims. They had been the dominant group in Iraq since 1921, although Shiites formed the majority, as I said before. They were against the intervention in the Middle East by the colonial powers. They called for unity among the Arabs in the Middle East, and this is sort of an era of nationalism. And then, of course, they find their sort of unity in many ways in their opposition to the existence of the State of Israel. Now, when he's in Cairo, Saddam doesn't waste his time. He actually uses this time to graduate from high school, to get some sort of degree to improve his reading and writing skills, and he enrolls himself in a law degree at the University of Cairo, which he abandons pretty quickly because while he's in Cairo, General Qasim, who has him as one of the most wanted men in all of Iraq, is actually overthrown and murdered in February 1963 by Saddam's very own Ba'athist Party. So in 1963, Saddam sees it's perfectly fine. The Ba'athist Party pardons him for his crimes against the now formerly living or now executed Qasim, and Saddam returns to Iraq. Saddam is given a minor position at the Central Farmers Office, where he's tasked to find ways to improve the peasantry, and he sort of, his lot in life is starting to improve, although he is a relatively minor party official at this particular point. Nevertheless, he shows that he is quite astute, and he starts to build up a power base within the Ba'ath Party. Saddam is quick to make friends and alliances that will boost his position and his prominence and utility within the party himself. He's pretty good at picking out who the next power brokers will be and aligning himself with the up-and-coming guy. And he does this by befriending a man named Ahmed Hassan al-Bakir. And in February 1964, he is appointed by Bakir, because of his trusted friendship with him, to be a member of the regional command. And within the Ba'ath Party itself, really the decision-making party, the party that makes all of the decisions for the government, is known as the regional command. And Saddam becomes a member of this in 1964. In September 1964, he will find himself out of power. It's important to note that in summer of 1964, the Ba'ath Party itself is ejected from power in another military coup, and another military government comes to power. The Ba'ath Party will return to power in 1968. But in September 1964, really smarting from this overthrow of power, Saddam tries to assassinate the new leader of Iraq, and he's arrested and thrown in jail. Sympathizers within the jail themselves, Ba'athist sympathizers, actually help Saddam orchestrate an escape, and he gets out in July of 1966. Saddam will then help in working behind the scenes within the opposition Ba'ath Party in Iraq, which is purely revolutionary after they were ousted from power in 64. Between that point and 1968, he will help orchestrate another rebellion. He'll help the Ba'ath Party make allies in the military, which eventually leads to a bloodless coup where the president is ousted and al-Bakir becomes president of Iraq. Saddam, for his work in this, is appointed into a very high position known as the deputy chairman of the Revolutionary Command Council, which puts him effectively as the #2 in charge of Iraq. This was probably, and is, or was, rather the most important decision-making body of all of Iraq, and he is the #2 in government circles. A very powerful position for a young, hardworking, ambitious man who is very charismatic and good at making friends to truly influence what's going on in Iraq. So how is he able to come to power if he's now just second in command? There was always someone before him. The first one is he had a strong power base. Okay, he's always careful not to show himself to be a man with too many presidential ambitions, and he keeps President Bakir very close by convincing him, I'm here to help you, not necessarily take over from you. And in the background, what he's doing is he's outwitting, outmaneuvering, and eliminating any rivals who challenge his position. And eliminating any rivals doesn't mean he kills them so much, but he creates scandals, for instance, that would show them to be ill-prepared for government. So these people aren't chosen over Saddam for government positions he wants. He begins, again, because he's becoming so powerful, to appoint friends and family to the Revolutionary Command Council. And the key decision-making body in Iraq under the Ba'ath Party after 1968 is the Revolutionary Command Council. Having friends and family who are responsible and beholden to Saddam for this very important job and very important position means that Saddam is able to leverage that appointment for them to support him in any sort of move he would make towards securing more power. He also controls important departments such as the army, and he gained control of the secret police, which gives him enough power to sort of scare people and intimidate people to follow him. A couple other reasons he comes to power. #1, popularity. He's an adept politician. He's good on foreign and domestic issues, which make him very popular. A couple examples include, in April 1972, he's a key mover in what's known as the Treaty of Friendship, which is a treaty signed with the USSR, which gave Iraq a Cold War ally that wasn't the United States, but was Russia, and Russia is able to pour money in Iraq. And he's able to use this money to sort of improve his own standing and improve the lives of Iraqis. What's more, in June of 1972, he will support and be instrumental in the nationalization or taking over of all of Iraq's oil industry. At this point, most of Iraq's oil industry was foreign-owned, but mostly by the British, in fact. And when Iraq takes over this oil industry, he will direct this new wealth to help improve people's lives. He'll build schools, hospital, transport, and things that people wanted and needed. And even though he was a sort of a military strongman, as was the Ba'ath Party, a minority Muslim party, they're doing things which the people like, which garner him support. In 1973, Iraq will join other Arab-producing states in reducing oil production and really decreasing the sale of oil to Western countries, which will have an effect of driving the price of oil up. Now, this creates an economic crisis in all westernized countries, and one which Arab nationalists relish because of course, they see this as sweet revenge for the years of colonialism. This makes Saddam incredibly popular in Iraq. The third reason is control. The Baathists extend their control over government and society, all government and society in Iraq. Ba'ath Party membership was required for any key post. Even if you wanted to work in a government job, such as being a teacher, you had to be a member of the Ba'ath Party. It allowed them to indoctrinate youth through education with a hatred of foreign culture and a love of the Ba'ath Party and its leaders, including Saddam Hussein, who was popularized as a hero for his assassination attempts, etc., etc. And lastly, repression. Of course, when President al-Bakir starts to grow old and fall into ill health, Saddam becomes sort of the ruler of Iraq in all but name. And he'll use the opportunity to effectively repress and imprison anyone suspected of disloyalty. And those suspected of disloyalty are the people who Saddam directly thinks present a challenge to his leadership. So these people are arrested and murdered. The secret police will dominate the army and prevent the army from becoming a group that can organize against them. And then he'll basically use his power within the army and secret police to persuade a very sick and ill President Bashir to resign and appoint Saddam president Iraq. And at the age of 42 in 1979, Saddam Hussein uses all of these things to become the unquestioned leader of Iraq after the resignation, I should say, of Bakir.